unions, and I'm a union person, okay? I really am. But I've seen the union support teachers who have no business being teachers, okay? You know, they should have gotten rid of them a long time ago, all right?
Yeah.
But say to yourself, I mean, like...
I got a teaching degree. I've done some teaching. My sister's teachers. My daughter's a teacher. But I don't think D.C. belongs in education at all. They can't even hardly do anything in there.
I'm agreeing with you. But what I'm saying is that where would the average teacher be without a union to speak for him and back him up? Okay? You know, it's like, yes, if you worked for IBM or a .com company back in the 90s when it was at its peak, and you were able to be paid what you were.
Yeah, I mean, you know, but then the teachers' unions, they do more harm to the children and the education of the children because they say, no, we're protecting our bad teachers, we're doing this, we're doing that, we're not allowing you to do this. They're almost like, they're more worried about making the teachers so, or being themselves so powerful as a union, and even the teachers look at it that way, and someone went off top. That they step over what really matters, and the real focus is let's teach the kids the Bill of Rights. Do you know the Bill of Rights, kids? Do you know how important it is? Do you know you're the most important leader in this country? That's what I teach the kids on there. We the people are sovereign. Anybody in government is our servant, and that's what they should be being taught. But they're not being taught that. They're just being, thrown around between unions and school boards and Common Core and this and that. And by the time they get out of there, most of them don't even graduate in the inner cities. It's ridiculous.
Well, I gotta tell you, because I taught in the inner city, okay, my whole 34 years, okay, never in the suburbs, always taught minorities. I tell you, I used to have the parents eating out of the palm of my hand, okay, when it was open school and a parent would come up and a parent would be belligerent or bellicose, okay, by the time they left, they saw everything the way I wanted them to see it, and I told my students, and eventually I used to train young teachers.
Well, that's a good thing to get, if you got parents there and they want to get involved, and that's how it should be. The old PTA, that's old school, but what you're talking
back
there.
In the 50s. Back in the 50s, I remember that.
Yeah, the old PTA 50s and 60s when I was going to school, and that worked good. But today it's not like what you're talking about. I mean, it's
you know why? Because
it's a war zone in our schools. Half of them, the inner city schools, half of them got detectors and stuff.
Ed, think of it this way: back in the 50s, when we were students, if a teacher called the house or a teacher made a home visit, okay, the kid knew his ass was in trouble.
Right. Today, you don't even have a family, half these kids.
Today, you get the parents coming up yelling and screaming at the teacher, okay, and this is what I mean when I say if you don't have a union to protect the teacher's up a creek, because the bottom line is principals, many of them have done away with certain security that they used to have.
The principal is just looking to try to be an administrator, and the administrators make big money. They're beyond a union. They're making $300,000-$400,000 a year. The head administrators, and the principals make $100 and some thousand, and it's just become a joke almost. That's why charter schools and free market schools are enticing the best teachers, because they give them a little more free range, and they can kick back kids out, and they got a lot more discipline in them. But what we got in the mainstream public schools is bad.
Well, you know why? Because one thing parochial schools have over public education is that if a kid screws up in parochial school, the first thing that the church would say, or the religious institution would say, is, Well, I hate to tell you this, but, next step for you is public education. We're going to kick your ass out of here.
Right. Right. And that's what, and that's almost like, that's not a good fate to have, so they got to behave. It's unfortunate that our public education system is so bad, but it is. But it's getting better. New Orleans went, and they're totally charter schools now. They did away with public education, which is, now it's all like charter schools. You choose your school, boom, because they've had a lot of problems there, and after Katrina and stuff, and they went totally charter schools. Pretty interesting thing. This is the first year. So we'll see.
Because the way things are now, eventually the parent gets to learn that, if all of these different schools are complaining about the kid, gee, maybe it is the kid's fault, They all can't be wrong, I mean,
right.
I remember a parent coming up to me. This was when I was doing senior activities. So I had a reduced program. I only taught 3 classes a day, and the rest of the day I was doing like quasi-administrative stuff, okay? And I had this one kid that was really a pain in the ass, and his mother was a big shot on the PTA, as you would call it.
Right.
So she came into my office, and she threw his report card on my desk, and she said, "What's wrong with this picture?" So I looked. The kid failed everything. I said, at least the teacher didn't have to change his pen when he was writing out the report card, because everything was in red. So she said, "How come," she said, "you were the only teacher I heard from?" I said, "Well, I hate to tell you this, but I can't answer for my colleagues." I said, "But I'll tell you one thing." I said, "We have an emergency contact card that every kid fills out in September, and they bring it home. And there's a listing of about 4 or 5 different phone numbers for the school to call in case there's an emergency." And this is exactly how I explained it to her. I said, "Do you know that the last number that I dialed finally was your number?" I said, "Your son is very skilled at picking out local businesses and using the phone numbers as an emergency contact." I said, "The first number that I called up, I ordered a pizza to have it delivered to the school. I got hungry." I said, "So don't blame us. This is your kid." And, so, no, I'm not done.
I mean, the kids are pretty shrewd about things. I know that. I remember, believe me, when I was in school, I wasn't there for education. I was there to get out of there as quick as I could. And I never really learned much in school. And
then, the kid was really a problem kid. He had a lot of problems, and the mother was making excuses for him. So the next day at lineup, I noticed the kid wasn't where he should be. So I went up to my friend, who was the assistant principal. I said, "Hey, Jimmy, where's Gavin?" He said, "Oh, his mother came up yesterday and switched his class." I said, "You gotta be shitting me. What the hell did she do that for?" He said, "Look at it this way. He's not your problem anymore.
Yeah.
He said, you did the right thing. She heard what she didn't want to hear. But the problem is that she has to answer for him until he's 18 before he could start answering for himself. So she was one of the problems because she just kept making excuses for him. You know?
She's backing up his bad behavior. And I understand what you're saying. And that happens too much today. And that is the biggest problem in this country right now, is there is no real parentship like there used to be. I mean, I'm sure 30, 40% of it's still good, but heck, over half the kids are coming from broken families. And
I remember calling up parents. I used to get home. The school would end at about 3:15. I got home around 4 o'clock. And I always gave myself a certain, like the first hour or so, or later on. I used to call to talk to the parent, and I got one parent. I called her at about 6. School ended at 3:15. She had me on the phone for a half hour. She was crying to me because
Wow.
her kid hadn't come home from school yet, and she knew that school. I said, so where is he for the last hour and 45 minutes, 2.5 hours? She said, I don't know. I said, that's the problem. I said, he's not coming home to you, which means he's out getting into trouble with his friends. I said, the school can't be all things to all
I know
people.
that picture. I did it myself when I was a kid, man. Yeah, you're right. I can't. That's why we need more diversity and more choices and stuff. And cyber school's a big thing now. So cyber school's really coming along strong.
One thing, I tell you, one thing I really have to pride myself on, and that was when I used to have kids coming back to school, like to visit, or if I'd see them in the street or in the neighborhood, if I was in the...
Right, they remembered you and said, hey, man, thanks.
And they said, Mr. Kennington, you never lied to us. I said, and what good would it do if I lied to you? I said, I used to tell you, remember the usual speech? I said, you already know everything you have to know to be a success. I said, all I'm going to do, I said, I'm a mechanic and I'm going to fine-tune your motor. Your motor is your brain. I said, whatever else you use it for, that's up to you. I said, but one thing you're going to learn, that the world owes you nothing. I said, you come in here and you expect that you're going to get this, you're going to get that, and when you get out,
right.
I said, the world isn't like that.
And that's a good way of approaching it, man. It really is. I like that attitude. You have to make the world want to give you something. It doesn't owe you anything. That's a good thing.
I said, when you get out of school, I said, what are you offering? I said, you're no different than anybody else. What are you offering?
Right. Right.
But anyway, Ed, it was a pleasure.
Yeah, I got to get going here too myself. Hey, I'll call you again in a month or so. I want to see what happens with the Trumpzilla versus the old Canadian, Cuban Canadian. I don't even know if he's illegal or run, but we'll see what's going on there.
You know what Trump said about Cruz? He said, well, if he doesn't make it to the presidency, maybe he could run for the presidency of Canada.
Chancellor. Right. He can run for the Chancellor of Canada, which is good. That's a typical, I call him Trumpzilla. Whoa! Watch where he goes, Trumpzilla.
Exactly. All right,
man.
Good talking to you.
All right,
thanks
a lot. Take care now.
So what were you sleeping there, Felix?
I couldn't get a word edgewise. I started talking twice, and nobody even heard me. I want to talk about...
Well, I tell you what you could do. I need a cup of coffee, so why don't you put on a song so I can make a cup of coffee?
All right, go ahead. Go have your coffee. We'll put We'll put something... we'll put on something that we haven't done for a while.
Okay, I'll be back in about 5 minutes.
All right, go enjoy your coffee.
All right, listen, I'm going to hang up and I'll call you back in about, I would say about 10:40, just in time to get ready to close it up. All right?
You got it.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Right. Bye-bye. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was Ed having quite a discussion there with Dr. Mark. I'll be honest with you, I couldn't get a word in edgewise with those guys. We're going to go ahead and put in a little more music for my pluggers now. Go to a little bit of jazz. My pluggers, and let's see what we got as of late. Let's see. Well, this is a guy I really like, a group I like. It's called Count Basic. Go ahead and hear some music from them. They're really good, I think. The first song is called Sweet Spot. All right, Count Basic from Austria.